I came home on Christmas Eve, as snow was gently falling and the warm yellow lights on the porch flickered like a scene from some holiday movie. Only difference was, I no longer felt like I belonged in that movie. The old wooden door creaked as I pushed it open, and warmth from the fireplace spilled out, mixed with the scent of cinnamon and gingerbread cookies my mom always baked during the holidays. But it was all just a facade. I knew that the moment my eyes landed on the photo hanging on the wall. It was right above the fireplace. Mahogany frame, glossy print, carefully placed like a prized keepsake. And in it was my family, the three of them. My mom in her favorite ivory knit sweater, standing close beside my dad with his polite smile, and in the middle, my younger brother, Ryan, pulling a goofy face like he always did. I stared at the picture for a few seconds, the chill cutting through my coat. Because I wasn't in it, not hidden, not standing behind someone, I simply wasn't there. There was no sloppiness in this photo. It wasn't a quick snapshot or a badly cropped frame. It was a deliberately taken and edited picture, printed large and displayed proudly in the most important room of the house. A conscious decision. As if I had never existed. As if I were an unwanted memory they deleted with a single click. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat, then stepped into the living room like nothing had happened. My mom called out from the kitchen, her voice gentle like everything was perfectly normal. "Catherine, you're here. I'm making that chicken stew you love." Her tone didn't waver. Not a single question about my flight, not a word about the weather or the months I'd been away. No explanation for what I'd just seen, for being erased from the shared memory of this family. I hung my coat on the hook, brushed the snow from my boots, and told myself I was imagining things, that maybe it was just a temporary photo. But my mind wasn't that easy to fool. Ryan was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, nodding slightly in my direction. "You're here. Thought you weren't coming." I gave a half smile and sat across from him. "Yeah, I used to think that too." On the table were neatly wrapped presents, handwritten tags, shiny ribbons, each with a name. Dad's, Mom's, Ryan's, but not mine. I glanced at the tree, decorated as carefully as every year, except the handmade ornaments I'd crafted as a kid were gone. The glass baubles with names etched on them, the glittery wreaths I'd glued together, all vanished, as if I'd never left a mark. Mom stepped out with her apron dusted in flour, her face glowing. "Dinner's almost ready. Is everyone hungry?" I looked at her, trying to read any hint of guilt in her eyes. But there was none. She was still smiling, still gentle, as if there was nothing worth mentioning. "Mom," I started, but then stopped. I had planned to ask about the photo, but suddenly I felt foolish. I already knew the answer. A forced chuckle. A "don't be so sensitive." An excuse like, "no one meant anything by it." And I didn't have the strength to hear that anymore. My dad came down the stairs, holding a glass of wine, his voice even. "Catherine, you look good. What have you been up to?" Not "how are you?" Not "I missed you." Just a casual question, like he was chatting with a neighbor. "Thanks, I've been managing," I replied, then walked into the kitchen, where heat from the oven filled the room. The food smelled amazing, everything perfectly prepared, only I no longer had an appetite. It didn't feel like home anymore. Dinner played out like a performance. Everyone stayed in character. Mom asked Ryan about his internship at the ad agency. Dad talked about his upcoming golf tournament, and me, I just sat there, an unwilling audience. No one asked about my new job. No one asked why I moved cities. No one cared if I was still with my ex. Every word at the table felt like a tiny needle, subtle, but enough to remind me I was just a stranger here for the occasion. When Ryan opened his gift from our parents, an expensive smartwatch, I tried not to react. As for me, at the end of the meal, I received a pair of wool socks and a card that read, "Merry Christmas to my strong daughter." I smiled faintly, not because I was happy, but because I had stopped expecting. After dinner, Mom told me I'd be sleeping in the guest room. Not my old room, the one with photo-covered walls and daisy print sheets I adored. That room was now storage, replaced by a foreign bed and a flickering nightlight. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wrapped in my scarf. Then I pulled from my coat pocket a thick cream envelope, the recipient's name printed in delicate handwriting. I'd prepared it weeks ago, unsure when to hand it over. The moment I saw the photo above the fireplace, all hesitation disappeared. I didn't need to raise my voice, didn't need an explanation. I just needed the truth to be where it belonged. That night, I lay there listening to the wind howling through the window and the soft footsteps of someone heading to the kitchen for water. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about all the years I had waited, for a real hug, for a sincere question, for a simple recognition. But even now, all I have is an empty space in the family photo, and an envelope holding something they can't deny one more time. On Christmas morning, I woke to the smell of waffles and the sound of music playing from the small speaker in the kitchen. Let It Snow played softly through the closed door, mixed with Mom's laughter and the scraping of chairs on the wooden floor. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, then reached for the envelope still tucked in the pocket of my coat, hanging at the head of the bed. The paper was still smooth under my fingers, as intact as the resolve I had felt the night before. When I stepped into the kitchen, everything was in place like a photo shoot ready for a magazine. The table was covered with a red and white checkered cloth, candles were lit, and a tray of cinnamon rolls sat in the center like an essential showpiece. Mom was plating scrambled eggs, her hair in a neat bun, lips painted coral. She looked so cheerful, like nothing strange had happened the night before. "Good morning, sweetheart. Hope you slept well," Mom said without turning around. "The living room was a bit cold," I replied, then poured myself a cup of coffee. Dad was already at the table, focused on his phone, and only nodded as I pulled out a chair. Ryan was talking about his new job in Austin, where he'd just been hired as an interior designer for a restaurant chain. My brother had the tone of someone used to being listened to, steady voice, well-timed pauses, confident eyes. "And I'll be flying to Tokyo in February. They're opening a new branch, and they want me to help with the Zen-inspired LED lighting concept." "That's amazing," Mom said, eyes lighting up. "I always knew you had a creative touch. Remember when you repainted the bathroom at 13? No one in the family has dared change that wall color since." Everyone laughed. I smiled along, but it felt like I was smiling in someone else's photo. Forced. Out of place. "Catherine, are you planning to switch jobs?" my dad asked, eyes still on his screen. "I already did, back in September. I'm working as an operations manager for a logistics firm in Denver." "Oh, right, Denver." No one followed up. No comments, no congratulations, no compliments, not a single glance in my direction. Just a silence that quickly got filled by Ryan continuing his story about a showroom design project in Manhattan. When the gifts were brought out, I stayed seated, knowing exactly how things would unfold, just like every other year. Ryan opened Mom's present first. Inside was a Tag Heuer watch with a brown leather strap and a blue dial, clearly a collector's edition. "Oh wow, Mom, Dad, this is the limited edition." Mom clasped her hands together, eyes sparkling like she'd just performed magic. "We knew you loved that model since last year, so your dad ordered it back in June." My dad smiled and patted Ryan's shoulder like he'd just closed a big deal. As for me, I got a mug, white with black letters. "Special daughter, who else could it be?" I turned the mug in my hands, my finger running over the words like brushing against an old joke. Mom said, lightly, "I thought it was cute. It made me think of you right away." I smiled, but all I felt inside was emptiness. I used to try to understand them, told myself maybe they just didn't know how to show affection. But the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't that they didn't know how, they just didn't want to give it to me. I remembered when I was 17. I got invited to a summer internship program at a research institute in New Jersey. I was so excited to tell my parents, thinking they'd be proud. But Mom just asked, "Can you wait until next year? Your brother needs me to take him to weekend art classes." So I didn't go. A year later, Ryan got an art scholarship to UCLA, and the whole family threw a big outdoor party. Applause, lights, a 3-tier cake. When I got my acceptance letter from the state business school, I got a quick hug from Dad, and a reminder. Make sure you save your money. I used to think I was stronger than Ryan. I got by on part-time jobs, from working at supermarket counters to handing out flyers at fairs. Once, I couldn't afford a textbook, so I hand-wrote all the lecture notes on loose paper and took photos of the library copy with my old phone. I never blamed anyone for it. I just wished someone had asked, "Do you need help?" When I got sick in my final year of college, had a high fever for 3 days, barely strong enough to get medicine, I called Mom. She answered, said she was at Ryan's art exhibit, and asked if I could wait until the weekend. I hung up and for the first time felt both empty and oddly free inside. That's when I began learning to live without them. Without encouragement, without gifts, without recognition. But knowing is one thing. Living with it is another. Watching Ryan beam over his new watch, I wasn't angry at him. I just saw more clearly where I stood. Always on the edge, just enough not to be forgotten entirely, but never enough to be fully kept. Breakfast ended with laughter. I washed my mug, placed it upside down on the drying rack, then quietly grabbed my coat from the living room. The envelope was still in the pocket. I planned to hold on to it until noon, after all the gifts had been opened, after everyone finished playing their roles. But something in me had shifted. The photo above the fireplace, the expensive watch, the mug with its loaded message, it all piled up, pushing me toward a limit I had touched too many times before. I pulled out the envelope and placed it on the table next to a bowl of untouched strawberries. No one noticed. I sat back, waiting for the moment when everything would change. Not because I caused a scene, but because for the first time I was making them face the truth. I'll never forget that day. A crisp September morning, slightly chilly, when I stopped by the Fremont County Administrative Office, just to request a copy of my residency certificate for a new job application. It was a simple, routine errand, nothing special. But I never expected that one document would open a door that had been locked tight for nearly a decade. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and reading glasses on a chain, looked at her screen, then tilted her head and asked me, "You're Catherine Moore, born July 18, 1992, correct?" I nodded. "So, you're still listed as the property owner at 2185 Brookfield Street." I froze. "Sorry, what?" "2185 Brookfield, the triplex near Creekside Park," she said in a steady tone like she was reading off a daily list. "That property's been under your name since 2016, transferred from Mr. Edward Moore. Edward Moore was my grandfather. He passed away 8 years ago." I thanked her and left the counter feeling like someone had just spoken to me in a foreign language. I didn't own a house. I had never been notified of any inheritance. No one had ever mentioned my grandfather leaving anything to me. For the entire week after, I lived like a ghost. I went to work, smiled, laughed as usual. But at night, I started digging. Searching public records, emailing the property archive office, and hiring a lawyer to help comb through any legal documents tied to Edward Moore. And layer by layer, the truth came out. My grandfather had left behind a legal, notarized will, clear and binding, in which he wrote, "I leave full ownership of the property at 2185 Brookfield Street to my granddaughter, Catherine Moore. No conditions. No intermediaries." But I had never seen that will. Because right after he passed, my father, Robert Moore, handled all the paperwork for the family. He told me my grandfather left a small amount of cash for funeral expenses and a few keepsakes he wanted us to hold on to. I never questioned it. It wasn't until I reviewed the tax records that I realized my parents' names kept appearing in income reports from renting out the 3 units in that house. They had been quietly collecting rent, renovating, even raising prices for 7 years, operating as property managers without any legal right. Meanwhile, I the sole legal heir, had been completely shut out. I remember sitting for hours in front of my computer, hands trembling as I read each detail. While I was borrowing money to pay for dorm fees, eating cold sandwiches to save for the next semester, my parents were using property in my name to fund Ryan's private university tuition, throw outdoor birthday parties, and take spring vacations to Florida. Once the initial shock wore off, I felt strangely calm. No more sudden anger like all the times I'd been overlooked before. Just a cold, steady clarity. I knew what I needed to do. I hired a lawyer to prepare a full set of documents. Certified copies of the will, evidence from property records, bank statements, and letters from the rental office. A nearly 1-inch thick file, neatly sealed in a cream envelope stamped with a red legal seal. I'd kept it in my coat pocket since early December, carrying it around like it was the only thing holding me together through these artificial family dinners. I wasn't planning to explode. I didn't need a dramatic confrontation in the living room. I just wanted them to know that I knew. That this time, I wasn't the compliant daughter, waiting patiently for an explanation that would never come. I remembered the last time I mentioned Grandpa. It was on my 25th birthday, when I quietly brought cake to his grave and sat there for hours, telling him about my job and how I'd moved to Portland. When I told Mom about it, she just nodded and said Ryan was also thinking about moving there because the street art scene in Portland really suits his energy. Not a single word about the fact that I'd been living there for 2 years. Funny thing is, I'd forgotten about that house too. Grandpa used to say he'd renovate it after retirement, turn it into a place where lonely seniors could rent at a fair price. I thought he had sold it long ago. I never asked again, because I wasn't used to expecting anything from this family. Now I understand. Some things you don't need to ask for, because they were yours all along. On Christmas night, I placed the envelope on the dining table, amid torn wrapping paper and half-finished wine glasses. No one noticed. No one asked. They were too busy chatting, tossing hollow praise at Ryan and his plans to open his own gallery. I sat there silently, my hand resting on the rim of that special daughter mug. And this time, I truly believed the words. I was special because I was the only one in that room who carried the truth. And I was about to make them taste it. Every line, every word, no accusations, no tears, just black and white facts and a Christmas smile. I was ready. I sat quietly at the corner of the table, sipping lukewarm coffee from the mug that read, "Special Daughter." Around me, Christmas carried on exactly as scripted. Mom added more cookies to a plate, Dad played soft classical music from the Bluetooth speaker, and Ryan laughed loudly as he unwrapped another present. A pair of next-gen noise-canceling headphones, the same model he'd mentioned during an interview. The cream-colored envelope still lay untouched on the table, surrounded by wrapping paper, red ribbons, and crumbs. No one noticed it, at least not until my mom picked it up with a curious look. "What's this?" she asked, her voice still light, as if she were asking about dessert. I looked up, completely unfazed. "From me." My dad raised an eyebrow, pausing mid-tie on the last bow of Ryan's gift. "You didn't have to get us anything. Just having you here is enough." I set my mug down and said evenly, "I know, but this time, I wanted to." The air paused for just a beat, just enough for me to feel that everything was about to shift. My mom sat down, turned the envelope over in her hands, and looked to my dad as if waiting for a signal. He gave a small nod, and she began to open it. The rustling paper echoed in a room that was already too quiet. My dad leaned over her shoulder to read along. Ryan was still organizing wrapping paper, but I knew his eyes were about to shift. About 20 seconds passed. I hadn't taken my eyes off my parents. My mom's face began to lose color gradually, and my dad furrowed his brow, sweat beginning to form at the tip of his nose. "What is this?" my mom asked, her voice lower now. The lightness was gone. I answered slowly and clearly, like reading a line from a contract. That's A copy of Grandpa's will. It states clearly that he left the house on Brookfield Street to me, directly, without conditions or intermediaries. My mom blinked rapidly and my dad placed the papers down as if they'd burned his hands. Ryan looked up, confused. Wait, what house? I turned to Ryan, calm as ever. The house you used for your creative lifestyle photo shoot in last fall's campaign? Ryan's face hardened. You mean… Yes, I cut in. That house was a gift from Grandpa to me, but for the past 7 years, Mom and Dad have been secretly renting it out, collecting money and treating it like their own. My dad shot up from his chair, the legs screeching against the floor. Catherine, this isn't… It's not what you think. I did? I didn't respond. I simply pulled out a confirmation letter from the property registry and a letter from the attorney, placing them on the table. It's all here. Title transfer records, rental income statements, bank records, everything's clear. I didn't come here to argue, I came to inform. My mom stayed seated, her mouth slightly open as if searching for words, but finally all that came out was a sigh. We didn't mean to, Catherine. Things were complicated back then. You were in school. You couldn't manage a property. Your father just wanted to keep things steady. I leaned forward slightly for the first time. No one asked me. No one told me. No one let me decide what to do with my own inheritance. And all that time, I was borrowing money, eating instant noodles, juggling 3 jobs just to stay afloat, while you used my money to vacation in Palm Springs. My dad raised a hand, trying to calm things down. You were always strong. You didn't need… It's that kind of thinking that left me behind, I said, my voice low. Being strong doesn't mean being used. Not needing help doesn't mean I deserved to be forgotten. Ryan stood up, hands on his hips. Oh, I didn't know anything about this. You didn't need to. You just got to enjoy it. Silence flooded the room like a thick wave. My mom looked up, eyes glassy but dry. So what are you going to do? I already did. The house is officially back under my name. All lease agreements have been updated. Starting next month, rent will be deposited directly into my account. You no longer have access… My dad frowned. By doing this, you're destroying everything we built. I laughed, softly but clearly. No, Dad, I'm just taking back what's mine. My mom reached out, her voice hurried. But you can't do this to your family. I looked her straight in the eye. Family? You haven't been mine for a long time. I stood up, put on my coat, while the background Christmas music kept playing awkwardly behind me. Ryan called out, You think you're better than us now? I turned back, gave a faint smile. No, Ryan, I just know I'm not beneath you anymore. I walked out of that house without looking back, without needing to say anything else. The snow was falling light as mist, not heavy, not denying. I took a deep breath of the freezing air. Clean, sharp, real. I knew, from that moment on, I was no longer hidden. No longer the faded figure in old photographs. No longer the one living on the edge of family memory. I was the one standing in the center of my own story, in the center of the house that bears my name, in the center of the truth. And this time, I wasn't running from it. 2 weeks after Christmas, I got the first message. It came at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, just as I was making coffee in the small kitchen of my apartment in Denver. My phone lit up. From Mom. Sweetheart, your father and I just got a notice from the bank. We need to talk, urgently. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because I'd learned to listen to silence more than any explanation. 7 years of silence from them couldn't be undone by 3 broken lines in a text message. The second message came that afternoon, from a number I hadn't saved but still recognized by the way it was written. I know you're angry, but can we sit down and talk like adults? You don't want this to tear the whole family apart. This time, I chuckled. Like adults? Adults don't alter wills behind their daughter's back. Adults don't use their daughter's property to fund vacations for the chosen child. I turned off notifications. By the end of January, I heard from an old friend who lived near the condo where my parents had been staying. She sent me a photo. The unit they once lived in had a handwritten, "For sale by owner" sign taped to a piece of white cardboard. A week later, I saw the listing pop up on a local classified site. The description read, "No agent, must sell quickly due to personal financial matters." That condo had once been what my mom called our second nest, where she hung her favorite landscape paintings and told Ryan, "Someday you can use this as your creative office." Now, they were being forced to sell it. I didn't feel triumphant, but I didn't feel guilty either. I knew without the rental income from the Brookfield house, they couldn't keep both places going. I also knew that during all those years, they had no stable income. My dad had retired from engineering 3 years ago, and Mom only worked a few part-time shifts at a nearby flower shop. They'd been living entirely off rent money, from property they kept hidden from me. And Ryan? One evening in mid-February, while I was reading, my phone lit up again. From Ryan. "I got kicked out of the studio. They said I'd been late on rent. Mom says you won't help. Are you seriously going to ignore this?" I locked the screen. Ryan had once bragged about that studio at a year-end party in Los Angeles, said it was an open space for creative freedom, untouched by finances or responsibility. Maybe now he finally understood that even freedom needs to be sustained by truth and integrity. About a week later, I heard through friends that Ryan had moved back in with our parents. They were now all sharing the old house in the suburbs of Fremont. The same one my mom once called, "too small for big dreams." That house had once been where I slept on the sofa during holiday visits. Now they had no other choice. I still lived my own life. Waking up early, working at the logistics company, coming home in the evenings to read, sometimes watering my plants or walking the dog I recently adopted around the park. I no longer had to prove my worth. No longer needed to build a story to make someone proud. I just lived, peacefully, in the house on Brookfield. I officially took over ownership and re-signed the lease agreements for the 3 families living there. When I announced a 10% rent reduction below market rate, one of the tenants burst into tears. The woman on the ground floor hugged me tightly and whispered that I was the first landlord who made them feel seen as a human being. That moment was worth more than any gift I had ever waited for from my parents. The final message came one afternoon in March, accompanied by a long email. This time, it was from my mother. "Catherine, I know you're angry, but you can't let this one thing ruin everything. We're family. Ryan is really struggling. Your father hasn't slept in a month. I know I was wrong, but please, think it over. Families shouldn't fall apart over one house." I read that line and stopped. One house? I remembered all the nights I slept in that damp, drafty dorm room, too broke to buy a new blanket. All the times I had to choose between buying a textbook or filling my gas tank. All the months I forced myself to reject phone calls because I knew they couldn't, or rather wouldn't, help. And now, when I'm no longer a resource they can quietly drain, they call it one little thing, just a house. I closed the email. I didn't respond. I didn't need to scream. Didn't need to defend or argue. My silence was the clearest answer I could give. I had started learning how to enjoy silence, not the silence of being forgotten, but the quiet of someone finally living in alignment with their own worth. I didn't hope they would understand. I only hoped they would stop. And if they couldn't, I wasn't there to listen anymore. One Sunday afternoon, sitting in the backyard of the Brookfield house, I watched sunlight filtering through the leaves and thought, maybe this is what I really inherited from my grandfather. Not a house, but the right to choose my own life. That spring arrived earlier than usual. The maple tree in front of the Brookfield house started to bud by late March, and I spent each weekend standing in the backyard, shovel in hand, sometimes just feeling the earth beneath me like a quiet reminder. I truly belonged here. I hired a local crew to repair the roof, replace the rotted wooden window frames, and repaint the white fence that framed the small front yard. Nothing fancy. I just wanted the place to be a calm, simple space, free from lies and sidelong glances. A real home. The ground floor remained as is, with 3 rental units. I lived on the second floor, in the room my grandfather once used as his reading nook. That room had a large window facing the park, where every morning I could hear sparrows chirping and watch sunlight spill onto the white linen curtains. I bought a navy blue armchair, identical to the one Grandpa used to have. I placed it in the corner, beside a small bookshelf and a brass reading lamp. In the evenings, I sat there sipping tea, reading, journaling, and not once did anyone call my name, just to ask about Ryan. One Saturday, I asked my close friend Elise to take a picture of me. Not some formal portrait, just me, standing in front of the house, wearing an old khaki coat, holding a ring of keys, with the freshly painted mahogany door behind me. No one else in the frame, no one standing beside me. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I printed the photo, placed it in a dark wood frame, and hung it in the hallway outside my bedroom. Every time I walked by, I remembered that moment, holding those keys, and how it felt like holding my life with both hands. I no longer checked my phone constantly, no longer woke in the middle of the night because of messages from my mother. No longer waited for an explanation letter or an apology, strong enough to patch over the cracked years. I wasn't angry anymore, truly. The anger that once burned in my chest on long nights had cooled, like ashes after a fire. Now I just felt quiet. As if, after everything, peace was the one thing that most confirmed I had survived, and more than that I had lived. Right. One drizzly afternoon, I was walking around the neighborhood when I ran into Mrs. Simmons, the elderly neighbor who lived 2 doors down. She walked over slowly, carrying a bouquet of wild daisies. "You must be Catherine Moore, right?" she asked, recognition in her eyes. "Yes, I am," I replied, smiling. I used to know Edward Moore, a good man. He'd lend me his car sometimes when I needed to bring things home from the market. "This house, it's yours now?" I nodded. She handed me the flowers, a simple and kind gesture. "He'd be so proud of you. You've brought this place back to life." I held the bouquet, feeling my heart ease, as if someone had gently soothed it. Not everyone knew the full story, but that didn't matter. What mattered was I no longer had to prove anything. Since moving to Brookfield, I started writing down the things I used to overlook. Not as a memoir or anything grand, just small entries. Today it rained lightly, I finished a good book, one of the tenants left a thank you note for fixing the washer on time. Little things, but real. The kind of feeling I never had while living in Ryan's shadow, and the weight of invisible expectation. One day, while watering plants on the back porch, I received a card. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting right away. It was my mother's. Inside was an old photo. It was me and Grandpa standing side by side at the wooden table in the backyard when I was 12. His hand rested on my shoulder. We were both smiling. Below the photo was a short message. "We didn't know how to hold on to you. I hope you hold on to yourself. Mom." No apology, no explanation, no more blame. But I didn't feel hurt anymore. I folded the card and placed it in the drawer of my writing desk, next to the letter Grandpa wrote me when I graduated high school. I didn't need promises from the past. I just needed to protect the present. That summer, I invited a few friends over for dinner. Friends who had stood by me even without knowing the whole story. We had BBQ in the backyard, strung fairy lights in the maple tree, and played soft jazz. I couldn't remember the last time I had laughed that much. One of them, Marcus, a photographer, pointed to the house and said, "This place has really good energy. Not like fancy home good, but the kind that makes you want to stay." I nodded, my eyes drifting toward the porch where the lights shimmered against fresh green leaves. Because it doesn't ask anyone to pretend. I was no longer the child sitting at the edge of the table, hoping someone would ask, "Are you okay?" I was no longer the girl staring silently at a family photo missing one face. Now I was the only one in the frame, and I was enough. No explanations needed, no forgiveness required, no need to be remembered by those who once tried to erase me from their story, because in the end, I rewrote mine. Line by line, with truth, with resilience, and with an unconditional love I gave to myself. I am Catherine Moore, and for the first time in my life, I don't need to remind anyone of that. From my own story, I've realized that sometimes the strongest thing we can do is walk away from places that no longer love us, not to get even, but to reclaim our worth. I no longer wait for validation from those who forgot me. Instead, I've learned to live truthfully, rebuild from the pieces, and turn them into something steady. In this life, even if no one gives me what I deserve, I can still give it to myself. What do you think about Catherine's story? If it were you, would you have done anything differently? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, meaningful stories about life and family in upcoming videos.